Bardar Croesi, welcome. Sincere apologies for the technical difficulties which I've had personally joining the meeting, and welcome everybody to this extraordinary meeting of the Hywel Dda University Health Board. So we're meeting to discuss one item, but I'll just go through some of the governance arrangements first. So I have apologies for absence from Mrs. Chantel Patel, Dr. Ardiana Ginji, and Mr. Jeremy Hockridge. I don't think we have any other apologies.
Chair, we've also apologies, sorry, from Mr. Mark Henwood, Interim Medical Director.
Okay, thank you very much. So any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. I'd also like to welcome Mr. Stephen Harry, the Chief Ambulance Service Commissioner, the Director of Commissioning for Ambulance and 111, who is here attending this meeting to be able to answer any questions that members of the board may have on the information that we have concerning the Emergency Medical Retrieval and Transfer Service Review. You have the paper and the number of attachments. I would also like to draw attention of the board to the letter that we received yesterday from CLICE, which has been circulated to you, which is a copy of a letter which they have sent to Mr. Harry. So I'm going to ask our Interim Chief Executive, Professor Phil Clure, to really just outline some key issues from the paper, and then we will open it up for questions. Phil, over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Bardar. So this EMERT service is a really important service we're considering today. It's for the most critically ill people in our population. It's a service that uses air ambulance and also road vehicles, and has highly skilled individuals providing that service. And it only responds at the moment to around to a very small number, 1,000 of our 999 calls across Wales. It is an all Wales service, although our prime consideration today, of course, is our Hywel Dda population in Ceredigion, Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire. There are meetings of all health boards this week to consider the same paper and same recommendations that are in front of us today. And there is a joint committee meeting on the 23rd of April to consider the service from an all Wales point of view. And the joint committee is the new organisation, a new entity that has been set up to take over from EASC and WISC. So in the papers, there's a number of details in the papers, including the details of the options development process and how that was progressed through the last couple of years. There's all the details of the engagement process, which included 3 phases, and all the feedback that was received from public and staff. And you'll see in the papers, I draw your attention to the fact that 5.8% of the feedback was from the Hywel Dda population. There was larger feedback from Betsi Cadwaladr and Powys populations, and we were the 3rd highest. And we do need to remember our important role as part of the Mid Wales Joint Committee. Also within the feedback, there are the letters from CLICE through the process, and the responses from EASC. And as the Chair has just mentioned, we've received this week a further letter from CLICE, which I know has been shared with members. and that's also been shared. That letter has been sent across Wales to all health boards. In the paper, there's also information on unmet need, which I'd also draw members' attention to, which shows that Hywel Dda has I think the fourth highest level of unmet need across Wales. And actually, when you look at the accompanying paper that was prepared by Stephen, it talks about the purpose of the change. And one of the major purposes of the change was to meet unmet need. So in front of us, you'll see that there are 4 recommendations for us to consider today. It's really great to have Stephen here to answer our questions, as I know there will be a number of questions from members of the board. I wondered, Chair, if I might, since I have the floor, ask the first question, if that's okay, because I think it's a pertinent one for us.
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Stephen, I wondered if this might be a moment to turn your camera on. Is that okay? Hi, Stephen. Great. Stephen, look, I appreciate, thank you for all the work you've put in. I know there's been a huge amount of work from yourself and the team, and that you're attending various boards to help boards consider the papers and the recommendations. I suppose for me, one of the key benefits from this this change and this proposal is being able to meet further unmet need. At the moment, my understanding is there's around 1,000 people per year who might benefit from EMERTS, who we believe would benefit from EMERTS, who are not at the moment, and that the proposed change would meet 14% of that unmet need. That's the prediction. And so that would be 140 people. So I just wanted to first of all, I wanted to try and understand that, whether those figures are correct or whether it's a different figure. And the second question linked to that is that how does the proposed changes mean that we meet that further unmet need?
Thanks, Phil, and thanks, colleagues. It's great to be able to come along to the board meeting. We've worked very collaboratively during the whole of this process, and it's great that we're carrying on that process now. So thank you for that. In terms of the specific about unmet need, Phil, you're right. There are about 1,000 people every year that could benefit from this service that are not accessing the service at the moment. What we've done is we've used a fairly sophisticated modelling system, but it is a modelling system to assess how many more people we can get to. And I think the figure you quoted of 14% is at the lower estimate. I think we could probably do more. I think we could probably get to more than that. Specifically in terms of Hywel Dda, about 12% of all of the unmet need is Hywel Dda. And then when we start to look at that unmet need, what it is mainly in the hours of darkness. And the reason that we're unable to get to patients in the hours of darkness is that we only have one asset available to cover the whole of Wales, and that asset is based in Cardiff. And what we've shown is that you need more than one asset. You need an asset in South Wales and you need an asset in North Wales to be able to cover the whole of the population of Wales. The reason that impacts upon Hywel Dda now is because the asset is trying to get to places at the extent of its range. So it's trying to get to North Wales, and it's not. And when it's trying to get to North Wales, it's not available in South Wales, so you don't have cover. If we had an asset in North Wales, it could stay in North Wales. We then have the South Wales asset to cover South Wales, and we know if we do that, that I think we can get to close to 30 people a year more than we're getting. at the moment in Hywel Dda. So I think it's possible to get to that number. There is another reason, and the other reason is, and this affects the more northerly part of Hywel Dda, because the hours of darkness in the winter are obviously longer than the hours of darkness in the summer. And what we need to do is to make sure that and in the northern part of your area, you're generally served by a helicopter operating from Davern, because it's difficult for a car to operate from Davern to get to the patient in time in the northern part of your area. With the new aircraft that are coming in, they have night flying capacity, and can fly in the hours of darkness. So as well as getting the additionality around the resource staying in South Wales after 8 o'clock, between the hours of 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the winter period, then obviously you get more access to helicopter time there. When we draw all those things together, that means that you get more response in Hywel Dda. The other thing we've said in the report, Phil, is that if you get a service now, you will continue to get a service in the future. So this isn't about trying to just chase more numbers. This is about making sure that people that get a service now will continue to get one, but more people will get that. Will get the service. Hopefully that's covered the points that you wanted me to cover, Phil.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. That's really helpful. Phil, are you happy if I open it up now for questions?
Yeah, certainly. And I may, if it's okay, Chair, I may have a couple. We'll see how the questions go. I may have a couple of other questions.
Okay, I'll give other people an opportunity and then come back to you. Okay, thank you again, Stephen. So I'll open it up for questions. Anyone like to have a question to raise? Dalith, morning.
Bore da, Cadeirydd, bore da, Stephen. Apologies, I can't, technology has defeated me today, so you've only got me on audio, which some people might say is a good thing anyway. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for your updates and the report. I've got one or two questions, if I may, and it's regarding rurality and transport infrastructure. And when you say in the report about land-based services to meet the unmet need, and you did mention North Ceredigion as well, especially in a rural area, as you know, the roads are absolutely awful. Where we would have some RTAs or some agricultural incidents or forestry incidents, the road infrastructure for the team to reach the patient is minimal, to say the least. So how would you ensure that those more remote areas of our patch are covered by the land-based services? And if you are thinking of including more 4x4s or even tractors, Stephen, living on a farm, some of those areas are quite inaccessible. And as you may be aware as well, within the Ceredigion area, we do have an influx of tourists within the season, and that does impact on the numbers potentially of patients that we have. And if I may, another question about the land-based services. How confident are you that you are going to be able to recruit suitably qualified and experienced paramedic and doctor staff to service the new way of working? So there are two questions there, the rurality bit. I was going to ask a question about the Welsh language, but I'll leave that one. Okay. But those two are my main questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalith. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Dalith. Appreciate that. In terms of the work that we undertook around modelling, one of the things that we did take into account was the variation in population over the course of the year. So we did look at seasonal variation and took that into account. So we know that particularly in Hywel Dda, the population increases. So we took that into account when we undertook the modelling. So we factored that in to the modelling that was undertaken. one of the keys, I think, to being able to deliver a really good service in rural areas for this service, for this highly specialized service, is that we're able to protect the helicopter time for exactly the reasons that you've talked about. But when the helicopter gets on scene, we then have local liaison arrangements to make sure you can get to the patient. So in terms of being able to protect the helicopter service, we've got to keep the helicopters in South Wales more, which means we need to have a better service in North Wales than we've got at the moment. So what we've got at the moment is we've got at night 530,000 people in North Wales that are not getting access to the service. So there's an issue that we need to deal with there. The second issue I think is a really important one, which is are we, as well as looking at this highly specialized service, are there things that we can do in terms of ambulance service provision in rural areas, and how can we improve that? So I think what people don't really understand is that actually, because this is a highly specialized service, because as Phil said, it goes to about 1% of all of the 999 incidents across Wales. The resort that it's not a resource that goes to people with strokes or heart attacks, for example, but we need to look at that, and we need to make sure that we're able to provide a service there. Now, what we're proposing in one of the recommendations is that we develop a bespoke service for rural areas, and that we set up a task and finish group to do that, which has broad engagement and broad local ownership. And then we report back the detail on that in 6 months. And what we're also saying is that what we should do is sequence all of this so that we don't, and the way that we enact the changes is sequenced. So we're putting services in, we're not taking the services away, we're adding to services. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of reassurance. In terms of the recruitment, 2 things to say about that. One is for the highly specialized EMIRTS service. The highly specialized EMIRTS service is a very attractive service to work in. So you have more people who want to work in the service than we have vacancies. And this has attracted additional doctors into Wales who've come into Wales because of the service. And then they work in local hospitals as well. As far as the rural model is concerned, we've had conversations with both EMIRTS and the ambulance service, and they are very excited actually with the prospect of developing this bespoke service. And they think it's going to be very attractive because we know that it can be difficult to recruit the highly specialized paramedics into rural areas. But by rotating staff into the whole service, it makes it very attractive. So we're confident that we'll be able to improve recruitment, Gareth. Hopefully that's covered the 3 key points that you asked me.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. It's just the issue about rurality access in our transport infrastructure.
Yeah.
That was another thing, and whether or not there are discussions about that.
Yes,
Thank you.
Is the answer to that question. And also, when we were looking at response times, we took into account the type of roads and the type of terrain. So we didn't just do a simple circle on a map and say you can get there within that amount of time. We did detailed information on those isochrones.
Okay. Diolch yn fawr, Stephen.
Thank you very much. And so I'll go to Rodri now.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to touch on recommendation 4, and Delith has touched on it regarding the bespoke road-based model. And back perhaps to the letter that you've had from Llais. I think there's a couple of questions there that are important, and perhaps for us to have that answer from yourself kind of publicly here, because obviously it does say further work be undertaken by the Wales Air Ambulance Charity to scope an operational base in line with finding to support future decision making. But then it does also say, well, no changes will be made to current EMIRTS base locations until 2026. So why the urgency to have this decision out by September 24? Just so that we get that understanding, and perhaps it's a public forum. So I think it's important that we get that gist, and also that assurance that with a land-based, what happens when the task and finish has looked at that kind of, and what if we're not happy with the model that you've got, kind of where do we stand then as a health board? So.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the decision-making process on the on the bespoke service, then that would go through the new joint commissioning committee. New joint commissioning committee acts on behalf of health boards. So we work for health boards. So we would make sure that we follow health board governance process and the JCC process to make sure that we're putting in a service that's fit for purpose. Also in the development of that service, that we're working with representatives of the public, representatives of health board, and representatives of provider organizations to make sure that we're putting a model in place that is also that is an appropriate and a good model for rural services, but also one that people have had a chance to shape and influence, which is why I think we need a little bit of time to do that. We've got to get that. We've got to get that right. I think that doesn't impact upon the eMERT service actually. So the figures that I was quoting around the improvement in unmet need is not contingent on having that bespoke service. That bespoke service is in addition to that. In terms of the pace, well, we've been at this for 18 months, 2 years in terms of the process that we've been going through. This is a service which is 2/3 funded by the Air Ambulance Charity and 1/3 funded by the NHS. In order that the charity can continue to raise funds and continue to support the work with us and deliver the services that it delivers, it needs some certainty because there are risks to the charity in terms of its fundraising and those sorts of things. So it needs certainty to plan, and without that certainty, then there are potential consequences for it in terms of its fundraising ability. There's a risk in terms of its fundraising ability. So I don't think we're rushing things because this is something that we've been working through for 18 months to 2 years. But the charity needs a little bit of a certainty from their point of view to enable them to plan for the future. And then in addition to that, we would then have the bespoke rural service, which would be on top of that. That wouldn't be charity funded. That would be funded for within the NHS commissioning allocation, which you all provide me with. So there's a bit of there's a twin track needed here. What we're also suggesting, or what I'm also recommending, is that what you don't do is you don't make any changes to bases until you've got this bespoke service in place. But you have to have your roadmap to enable you to get there on that, and you have to start quickly on that to enable us to give stability and a degree of certainty to the charity, but also to have the time to make sure we engage properly on this bespoke service. There's a balance, as with all things, Rodri, there's a balancing act to be struck in all of this, and we're trying to strike an appropriate balance in that endeavour.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, I've got 2 more questions. First is from Maynard.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Stephen. Thank you for coming along today. I'm not sure whether this one's a question for you or for our Director of Finance. You mentioned in your previous answer that 2/3 of the funding comes from the charity, 1/3 from the NHS. In terms of the costings of the service, have we done any impact assessment on how our funds and the funds that are going to be needed to actually deliver the service? So any increase in funding, really, from our perspective, considering our financial position. That's the first question. The second question is more an issue of communication. It's obvious from the letters we've seen from Chris that there is public concern over this, and I don't know whether that's a question of perception or reality. From what you said so far, I think it may be perception. And I'm just wondering, how do we work together to address that and reassure the public that the actual changes are for their benefit?
Thank you, Maynard. In terms of the financial issue, what I have said is that in terms of these recommendations, I can deliver these recommendations within the current resource envelope. So I won't be coming back to you and asking you for additional resources. The reason I can do that is because there are efficiencies that can be made, and we've also got vacancies in the ambulance service which are costing us quite a bit of money in terms of cover. We can make that more. We can make more attractive posts, get people in, and therefore get better value from the sort of pound that you're giving, from the pounds that you're giving us through the commissioning allocation. So we can do that, and I'm confident that we can do that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be recommending that. On the issue of communication, it's super important, and I think, frankly, it is a perception issue, not a reality issue. What people believe, I think, is that if they need a service and the ambulance service can't get to them, then a helicopter will be able to fly into them and will be able to treat them. The reality is that isn't the case. The helicopter won't come because this is a highly specialized service, and it has to be protected to deal with those highly specialized patients. That's why it's important that we then look at, from a rural perspective, are there more things that we can do in terms of the delivery of ambulance services, which is where recommendation 4 in this report becomes important. So it's not about the EMIRT service per se, but it's about listening and saying, well, people are genuinely concerned. They're scared that a resource won't come to them. And we have to, and I think we can do something about that. I genuinely believe we can improve things and do something about that. But we have to bring the public along with us. And that's why we need a little bit of time to do that. But it's not contingent. I don't think that means that you can't do things with EMIRT service. So, but that's a difficult, you're right, it's a difficult message to come across. One of the things that we do is that we work collaboratively with all health boards. So I think there is an opportunity to further strengthen that and to continue and to work with your comms and engagement experts as well, who know the patch better than we do, and how do we better relay the message. This is always about learning. So how can we do it better than we're doing at the moment? At the end of that, though, some people may not believe what we're saying. So I have to be realistic about that as well. So I won't be able to convince everybody all of the time about everything. I don't think, Maynard.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Eleanor. Eleanor, you're on mute. We can't hear you. No, sorry, I can't hear you. I don't know if others can. No, sorry. We all seem to have had some technical issues today. I'm really sorry, Eleanor. I still can't hear you. No, I don't know if there's something we can help you with to get your sound up. Can I just move to perhaps to Michael, and I'll come back to you. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, yeah, the host has stopped my video, it's saying, so I can't see. Anyway, but I am here.
Yeah.
Can I just ask Stephen a very helpful summary? So can I just go back to the basic kind of headline figure you mentioned is the 500,000 in North Wales who don't get access overnight to the helicopter service, and there was that very helpful graph showing that line of the cutoff. So in very simple terms, the reconfiguration brings more people into access. Does it wholly bridge that 500,000 gap you have there?
It does. The putting an asset in the middle of North Wales adjacent to the A55 does two things, because that asset would either be a car or a helicopter, Michael. So what it does is, in urban areas in North Wales where you need a car response, you get the car response, but then you can protect the helicopter for the more rural areas of response as well. So it does cover the 530,000 people that are referred to in the report.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And the second question I had is this interesting point about the bespoke service. So so what you're saying, I think it's more clearer now from your very helpful explanation. I'll call it the bespoke service. The bespoke service is actually a different animal, is what you're saying.
Yes, it
All
is.
this. So when Lice make the point, quite a well put point, that, well, how can you proceed with the emergency services decision without bottoming out bespoke service? It's a different animal. So the bespoke service, though, if that was beefed up, that would come with extra costs potentially, because it's a different service. Isn't the question that by having this caveat in 4, it kind of slightly confuses the issue that it is an entirely different animal, and maybe the recommendation should possibly make that a little bit clearer, that is a wholly different process. I mean, everything inevitably is interlinked in Wales. Wales is not the biggest place in the world, so whatever you do, there's a ripple effect, an interlinking of some sort. But this is not a kind of a concession. I use that word just glibly, a concession. It's not it's an entirely different process, which will have its own engagement and thoughts and costings and stuff like that. I think that's right, isn't it? I think that, and I would suggest that possibly needs to be made clearer then.
Yeah, I would agree. That I mean, you learn a lot by engaging and communicating on things, and we can definitely improve the language, I think, Michael, in terms of the way that we're describing that. And it's really helpful to test these things because that enables us to do that. So you're right. You don't need the bespoke service to get the improvements in the highly specialized service, but you can make improvements to rural areas, which is what I heard when I was in the engagement process on the eMERT service, as by having this bespoke rural model. In terms of the funding of this bespoke rural model, I think we can do that within the existing commissioning allocation that I get. I get a significant commissioning allocation for eMERTs and for ambulance services, and I think there is an opportunity to make a much better use of that resource. Now, if we decide at a point in time we can develop things even further, that becomes a different debate. But I think we can make much better use of the existing commissioning allocation. That was hopefully that's clarified things. And I think a little reflection on that, on those recommendations, how we word that recommendation, would be extremely helpful. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I think it obviously comes to the next stage, which is where the Joint Committee will scrutinise not only this part, but actually when it comes to the plan, which will be produced by September. So, Eleanor, we're going to try again with your sound.
Okay.
Oh,
can
yes,
you hear me?
You're there.
Excellent. That's good. The question I had was, and I should say again, diolch cadeirydd for the chance to ask questions. Firstly, I fully understand the difficult need to balance the maximisation of the resources we have with providing the service that the people that we care for deserve. So this is a Devil in Deep Blue Sea conversation. Rodri has asked partly about the process should the road-based service plan be worked up. So I had a follow-on to that, which was, will there be a consultation on that once it's been worked through, and will the public and Llais be involved in that? That's my first question. The second is much more related to the charity. There is a genuine affection in the parts of Wales I know for the Air Ambulance charity. And is there a danger that a difficult and unpopular decision would impact on the charity's ability to raise resources in those areas which support it well, in order to continue a service? It goes back partly to communication. It needs to be very well explained, because the public support this, and hand on heart, they are very fond of the service. So those are my two questions.
In terms of the engagement / consultation on the development of the bespoke service, I would be very keen to make sure that we do that, which is why I think it takes a little bit of time to do that, and certainly involving Llais and members of the public in that is going to be really important, Eleanor. So that will be where my vote would be, if you like, in terms of how we move that forward. I don't think you can engage and communicate enough really on some of these things. So it's really important that we do that because people are really passionate about the service. I think there are two risks to the charity. I think one of the risks to the charity is that we don't make a decision quickly. Because if we don't make a decision quickly, then we will have greater uncertainty. And with greater uncertainty becomes you then get a risk in terms of financial contributions to the charity. What I would say is that the charity is a very well supported charity, and it is solid in terms of its financial model. However, we should never take that for granted. And what we and the charity need to be able to do is have a positive communication campaign to help support them. They need to do that themselves, but there are elements as well that we can work closely with them on. Is that without risk? No, it is not without risk. Of course, there is a certain level of risk, but I think there is greater risk in not making a quick decision and delaying things, because I think that will add more and more uncertainty into the picture. And what people might not necessarily like change, but once you've made a decision, at least you can be proactive about that and explain what's going to happen and be held to account for delivering what you said you were going to deliver. And so I think we have to try and move on a little bit, Eleanor, I think, in terms of this.
Thank you, Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Don, I can see your hand. I was going to invite Llais to come in if there's any comments you want to make. So I bring you in now.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak on this. We know that it is an all-Wales ambulance service, and we know that people are really, really passionate about the air ambulance. We've heard that echoed this morning. And I think from a Llais perspective, our concerns related to this is a difficult concept for people to understand. It's quite layered, and people have raised lots of questions about it, even though there have been documentation available, etc. And so the clarity of information was a concern for us. And as Stephen said, in terms of sequencing things, usually decisions would be based on the full information available, and I think there's been lack of clarity about why a decision is needed now and what the driver for that was, when we know that there would be more information available in September. And we feel that the public need to be assured that the decision is the right one for them, for the people of Wales, and that everything will be considered appropriately when decisions are being made. And I think that's the main issue for us, is that there will be more information available in September. Obviously, there have been various additional bits of information shared today, which I think has been helpful in terms of providing further clarity. But I think for the public, that clarity needs to be given to them also, because it is the public assurance that is particularly important. Thank you, Cadeirydd.
Yeah, thank you, Don. It's a good point. And as we sort of come to the conclusion today, we do recognise that. And I mean, some people will know I've experience of working with Air Ambulance, and I think there is some misunderstanding about the service and exactly when they respond and how. So I think to keep reinforcing the message and the information is really important. And Donna, you'll probably remember when the Health Board undertook their large engagement exercise over the strategy, both road and air ambulance service actually came up as quite a significant part of that. So thank you for your input. Stephen, I'm not sure that needs an answer really. I think it was making a point which we all understand.
Yeah, I agree. I totally understand.
Yeah, thank you. Lee, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on Eleanor's point in relation to the development of the option that we're referring to in relation to September, I think for clarity, what we'd what we'd be keen to do, certainly from a health point of view, and we've had this conversation with Stephen, is involve the public as much as we can through that process, and I know Stephen wants to do that as well. So engage as appropriate on that. And this question touched then on both engagement and consultation, and they are obviously slightly different requirements. So I think just for added clarity, I think we would certainly want to engage throughout that process, and the joint committee will want to see that in the development of the options, and then there'll be a further discussion and decision around whether that then warrants further engagement and formal consultation, which is obviously a different requirement. So that will be something for joint committee to consider, I think, once those options have been developed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lee, for clarifying. I can't see any more hands for questions, so Phil, I'm going to come to you just for any final points before we reach a conclusion as a board.
Thank you, Judith, and thank you, Stephen and colleagues, for the questions as well. So there's a couple of points I just wanted to draw out just to make sure we're clear. So one of them was quite a specific one, which was about the North Wales base, the new base. So would that, Stephen, allow night flying capability from North Wales, which of course we don't have at the moment?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted, because I wasn't sure that was completely clear.
Yeah,
I just wanted to
sorry,
make sure
I
that
made it clear. Very, thanks for drawing that out. Absolutely, yes.
Good. Okay. The next question really is something I've heard from members of the public and public representatives, is a concern that we have that there is we do see a 14% reduction in unmet need with this with the proposed changes, but there's a real concern that it's a shift of unmet need, and so that whilst there might be the benefits in North Wales, which is where most of the unmet need is, in places like North Ceredigion, for example, there's a real concern that there'll be more unmet need because of the new changes. It's just, I know you sort of addressed that, but I just wanted to.
Okay. One of the red lines, Phil, is that if you get a service now, you will get a service in the future. So this isn't about, this is making sure that we're providing, as well as people getting the service they get now in the areas getting there, more people are getting access to that service. It is absolutely not about substituting it. So we would be adding, we wouldn't be substituting in terms of this. I think it's a really important part. I've heard that loud and clear when I've gone through the engagement process. Thank you for drawing that out, because that is absolutely our position. This is about addition, not substitution.
And I'd reiterate the points that Lee, Eleanor, and others have made about the importance of engagement, and we'd want to support that as much as possible around recommendation 4, because I suppose in the documentation as it is, I suppose it would be difficult to be certain whether that exactly where the land-based service would be based, and would they really be a really realistic support to our North Ceredigion population. And so that would be, of course, something that our board would be really keen to see.
I would agree with that, and we would need to make sure that that's why the approach that everybody's saying is the approach we should be following around building up the detail around recommendation 4. I absolutely agree with. So that needs to be close engagement with you. We need to take and then a decision about whether the engagement goes to consultation or not. Absolutely making that public in terms of engaging with the public and having and working very closely with Llais on this, as well as yourselves. But again, making sure that when we're modelling where to put bases, we're not just we are taking account of North Ceredigion as well as other parts of Wales. It's really important that we do that. I think we have an opportunity here, quite an exciting opportunity actually, in terms of what could that bespoke rural model look like. I'm quite excited by the prospect because we've been trying to do this for some time. this I think is this presents us with a real opportunity to do that. And I would want to do that properly, but grab hold of it and make sure everybody's involved in that.
And lastly, and whilst as Michael says that the service outlined in recommendation 4 is an additional service, and you've made that clear that is additional unmet need that would be met if that service was in place. Because of the public concern and the sort of confidence around this, it does feel that there's a decision point in September about the whole service. That's what I'm just checking for us, because it feels that we're linking the implementation of this road-based service to a step in implementation of the whole model.
I think the fundamental point there, personally, Phil, is that you don't make any changes to the location of aircraft at the moment until you've got the bespoke service in place. So I think there's a sequencing here. So you're right, they're connected, but I think it's a connection in terms of that critical path, as opposed to needing to have everything buttoned down to the finest detail before you can make a decision on anything. We have to make some progress here, but you have to have some guarantees in that to make sure that there's some firewalls here. You can't make this change until you've got this in place. So that critical path and the sequencing, I think, is super important in how we deal with that.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephen. That's all my questions.
Right. Thank you very much. Well, I think I can't see any more questions. So, Stephen, if I can thank you, excuse me, for answering those so fully and so clearly. So I'm going to take the board to the paper and the recommendations in front of us. You'll see on the paper under section 2.23, the recommendations from the review that went to EASC, which is now part of the Joint Commission Committee. And then if I move down, you'll see under section 5, the recommendations that are in front of the Health Board. I'm not proposing that we go through all of those one by one, but I would like to sort of try and draw things together. I think we've had a lot of the concerns and our questions addressed and answered. And I do understand the position from Plyce, which Donna has laid down, and clearly there's more work to do in relation to communications, which I think has been acknowledged will need to be ongoing. I think we have a responsibility of a Health Board there. This is not only about the work the Joint Commissioning Committee can do, and I think we should look to see how we take that forward. But we also have heard some of the reasons why a decision to move forward is required now in relation to the work of the Air Ambulance Charity, which, as we know, and Stephen has confirmed, actually provides the funding for 2/3 of the funding for the air ambulance service. So what I'd like to suggest is that as a Health Board, we do approve the recommendations for the population of Hywel Dda, recognising that the Joint Commissioning Committee, of which we are a member, will consider the implications across Wales in their meeting on the 23rd of April, and they will also scrutinise the plan, which is described in recommendation 4, which will be provided by September 2024. And I think I would add at that stage, decisions around further public consultation and what matters may need to come back to the board will be determined. So is the board content with that recommendation? Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So I think we have that noted down. I'd like to, again, thank Stephen for attending, answering all the questions. I'm sure it won't be the last time, Stephen. The board will look forward to seeing you again when we are asking how things are going. Donna, as always, thank you very much for your input into this process, and we will certainly ensure that we continue the discussions locally about your specific concerns and those that will affect the population of Hywel Dda. But thank you for coming today, and thank you to everybody else. It's not a very nice day to continue with whatever you're doing, but I wish you the best for the rest of the day and see you all soon. Thank you very much. And I will now close the meeting. Thank you.